Hi, it's a pleasure to be here, and I sincerely thank the organizers for the opportunity to give me the chance to present the speculative fiction in Bulgaria. My name is Valentin Divanov. I'm Bulgarian, and I'm a longtime fan and promoter of the speculative genre in my country. I'm also a bit of a writer with about 40 stories published in my country and a few in various English language venues. Professionally, I'm an astronomer and I study star clusters, young and low mass stars, brown dwarfs, and planets. A few words about my country. It's located in the southern eastern corner of the European continent. It's mostly Slavic, with a population of just above 6 million and an area of about 111,000 square kilometers. To put this in a perspective for you, the Indian state of Telangana, I picked this up randomly and I hope I'm pronouncing it more or less correctly. It has about the same area, but it's the home of 35 million people. Bulgaria was established at 681 AC and has existed ever since, with some unfortunate breaks. Today, we are a parliamentary republic, and our GDP per capita makes us about the 60th most developed country in the world. Sadly, it's the lowest in Europe. Our banner is on the upper left and our coat of arms on the lower left. My country is beautiful. It has warm sea, great food, nice people, and some really excellent science fiction, if I may say so. The speculative fiction in Bulgaria has three different origins, and they're all true, okay? For most fans, the strongest contender for the first science fiction writer and first science fiction work goes to Ivan Vazov and his short story, The Last Day of the 20th Century. It was first published, pay attention, December 30th, 1899 in a newspaper. It's an utopia describing the life of the king and his family in one single day. Pay attention again, the day is December 31st, 1999, so it's a century later. Vazov saw the future Bulgaria as an idealized monarchy with a benevolent and responsible king. And I should add that hardly any real kingdom can make such a claim like for their own rulers. The story, written more than 120 years ago, features flying cars and zoom, surprisingly. Utopias are not very popular today, but back then they must have been really in fashion. For example, one of the earliest speculative fiction works in our neighbors, for our neighbors, Romania, also describes the country in a very prosperous future times. And the rumor has it that few small countries in Europe also follow this path, and makes me think why this may happen to small countries. The second contender will take us in the labyrinth of crypto-literary history. Veda Slovena is supposed to be a collection of real myths from the regions around the present-day cities of Pazardzhik and Nevrokop. Ivan Gospodinov, who on the right picture, said to have collected them, and Stefan Verkovic on the left published them later on in two volumes in 1874-1881. However, later on, other researchers could not find related folk tales in these regions. So, Gospodinov, who was a school teacher with classical education, may have forged the collection. He certainly had the right background and the necessary knowledge to do that. The researchers still argue if Veda Slovena is authentic, and it seems unlikely that this question will ever be answered to satisfaction, given how much time has passed. But one way or another, as a fantasy, it's a nice reading. The third contender is Ivan Vazov again, with a poem in The Realm of the Fairies, published in 1884. It was largely overlooked until the writer, critic, and genre researcher Alexander Karapanchev rediscovered it for the fandom a few years back. We see here the cover from the 1926 edition. Right below the title, in the middle, there is a small print that says a lyrico-fantastic poem, which makes me think that Ivan Vazov was consciously producing a speculative piece of work. Now, the point to take away from what I shown you so far is probably that the Bulgarian speculative fiction rests upon two elephants, folklore and history. And for the sake of time, you just have to take my word for it that the same is true for the modern day speculative fiction from Bulgaria. To have speculative fiction, somebody has to publish it. The history of the publishing started in 1922. The notable Argus publishing house was opened then by Svetoslav Minkov and Dimitar Polyanov, left and right portraits on the bottom respectively. They're known as fathers of the Bulgarian symbolism and forerunners of the horror. Bulgaria may have a claim for a first here, because Argus was the first publishing house that published only speculative fiction. Of course, there were other publishers in other countries even before, but for them, the speculative fiction was kind of a sideline. The narrow specialization actually is probably the reason why Argus survived for less than a year only. It managed to issue 6 books, 2 by the founders and some by people like Edgar Allan Poe and Jack London. Argus was resurrected in 1992, and for nearly 2 decades, it was a leading Bulgarian publisher, and many present-day Bulgarian writers actually became writers because of this modern Argus. There are many other publishers that I should mention. I will just mention here Quasar and Nerov, and I will ask for apologies to all those editors and publishers whose work I skip here for the sake of time. What is a fandom without magazines? At the beginning was Cosmos. Cosmos was a magazine that appeared first in 1962, and this is the first cover. Every issue had a science fiction story, hard sci-fi. Thanks to Cosmos, the Bulgarian fans had the opportunity to read some really excellent, today classics, Western science fiction works. FEP, shown on the left, was published between 1988 and 91. And this is an abbreviation that means Fantastica, Heuristics, and Prognostics. And it kind of testifies to the more philosophical interest that the community had at the time. Terra Fantastica is shown on the right, is the longest surviving genre magazine in Bulgaria. It just issued their 24th issue. Other publications that deserve to be mentioned are Orphea, an English language magazine for Slavonic science fiction, bottom center. Daga, a specialized comics magazine, this one. And then there is also Shadow Dance, a popular digital publication, Dracus, which is devoted mostly to horror, and Bulgacon. Bulgacon is a free digital bilingual, meaning Bulgarian and English, publication of the annual Bulgarian National Speculative Fiction Convention. And of course, this is not a complete list, and I apologize to everybody who I haven't mentioned. But I will mention one other publication, the Almanac Fantastica. The title was written intentionally as a mix of Cyrillic and Latin alphabets to underline the international nature of the publication. 10 issues appeared, more or less annually, each of 400 or 500 pages. One was in English. Fantastica was a brainchild of the late Atanas P. Slavov, shown here on the left. He was a towering figure in the Bulgarian fandom. So many initiatives were started by him that it's hard to count them. Few other people who were involved into the preparation of the almanac are also shown, and the almanac won an Eurocon for a periodical in 2015. The organized fandom in Bulgaria dates from the 1960s. The first club was organized in Sofia and gathered about 30 people. The second was the club in my hometown of Burgas, started by the same Atanas Pislau that I mentioned, and you can see him at young age on the upper right. The Bulgarian clubs in the 60s and 80s, curiously, had a very good, excellent taste in internal decoration, in a science fiction way, of course, even though their members had to make the decorations by themselves. The club in Plovdiv used to have a two-story hall that they converted into a common desk of a spaceship with screens, projectors. It was beautiful. The club in Sofia still uses the same room with the beautiful and very imaginative futuristic painting that you can see on the bottom right. I cannot skip but mention one very prominent figure in our fandom, Yuri Ilkov, is circled here in the center, lower center. He's responsible for the Terra Fantastica that was mentioned earlier, and for most of the national conventions that happened in the last 2, 3, 4 decades. He is often called the fan number one of Bulgaria. And this is not entirely a joke, it's quite serious. Conventions in Bulgaria typically gather between 50 and 150 people. For the sake of time, I will cover only the annual national convention, Bulgacon. And some conventions are international. For example, in 2024, we had Ian MacDonald and Farah Mendelssohn on sites as guest of honor. But our funding is very limited. So we have taken an additional path, and it proved very successful. We invite writers for an hour-long online interviews or readings or panels. These have worked really well and allowed us to, people were responsive. This allowed us to interact with figures like Peter Watts, Paul Macaulay, Wally Talabi, Harry Turtledove recently, Andreas Eschbach, and others. We also brought in fans from countries like India, as some of you may already know well, Egypt, Nigeria, Israel, Turkey, and others that are extremely far away and exotic to us. And they tell us about the speculative fiction and the fandom in their countries. Now, we also held the Eurocon in 2004. I will give a short summary of I'll present a few books by modern science fiction writers who are people who are still actively publishing today. And I apologize for skipping all other books and all other people who really deserve to be mentioned. Now, let's begin with a revelation. It's a short novel by Yancho Chulakov, and it's a literary speculative fiction piece of work that takes a very deep, questioning look at the reality, much like Philip K. Dick does in his books. It's a story of modern era shamanism masked as medical thriller. Now, Asen and the Travelers Across 101 Bulgarians by Elena Pavlova is a young adult novel about cross-world traveling kids. These kids find themselves in various alternative histories in various Bulgarias. Some are worse than ours, some are better than it. Along the way, the kids pick up a lot of life-changing experiences while being forced to mature very quickly. And finally, 10 to the minus 9 here on the right, also known as Nano, by Mikhail Telalov, is a novel that paints the difficult near future transition from our world to the singularity in the meaning of Vinci. Some people embrace the change, as you can expect, and switch to fast forward singularity mode. Others cling to the escaping past by all means, and a great conflict ensues out of this. Let me, at the end, summarize where one can read Bulgarian speculative fiction in English, because I expect not many people will invest the time to learn Bulgarian just to read our science fiction, although it's totally worth it. Very few texts are available, almost exclusively from the young post-perestroika writers. Genoveva Dimova is an archaeologist born in the town of Varna on the Black Sea coast and living in Scotland. A series of 2 novels of her were just published by Tor, Fall Days and Monsters Nights. They are available through the usual brick and online bookstores. And she also has a novella, Ace Up Her Sleeve, at Reactor magazine. Elena Pavlova, shown on the bottom left, is a prominent Bulgarian author who has published stories in Future Science Fiction Digest, Compelling Science Fiction, Dreamforge, and most recently in 2024 May-June, in the May-June issue of Asimov SF. Kharlambi Markov, bottom right, has stories that can be read in Uncanny magazine, 2 of them in fact, and in Tor, and in a bunch of other anthologies, including some of the best from Tor.com. Finally, my own stuff can be read in Letters to Tiptree and in Life Beyond Us. The letters actually won a Locus, but of course not because of me, although I'm honored to have contributed to that. Life Beyond Us is a very interesting beast. It's an educational, popular science reading about what life and our contact with it can be, life in universe. I have to say that I do astronomy outreach, and science fiction is an excellent vehicle for that. I also should mention the bilingual annual fanzine that I already mentioned, that comes at every BulgaCon, and it's a source of short speculative fiction, poetry, and non-fiction about the Bulgarian genre and fandom. It's a 200-page digital publication. It's freely available. Last but not least, in the June 24 issue of Locus, one can find a review article by Christian Tamash and myself about the speculative fiction in Romania and Bulgaria. It's available on the Locus webpage. Our main point is that limited readership and markets are the most formidable challenge that the speculative literature faces in countries like ours. They're constrained by the small readers base and the population, the small population numbers in our countries. We argue that the obvious course of improvement is to go international, and as you just saw, some Bulgarian writers have been quite successful working towards this goal. Ending on this note, I'll take again for your attention.